Right now, you probably believe one man and one woman, together for life, is the natural way humans are supposed to pair up. Almost nothing in the actual scientific evidence agrees with you. Not your grandparents' generation, not the last few thousand years of written history, and definitely not the hundreds of thousands of years before that. The truth sitting inside your own body, in your anatomy, your hormones, your instincts, tells a much messier story than one partner forever. So here's the question worth actually answering. Did ancient humans really have multiple partners? Not romantically, not as some modern dating trend. Biologically, structurally, at the level of the species, were we ever really built for one partner at all? To answer that properly, you don't start with humans. You start with our closest living relatives. Chimpanzees are wildly promiscuous. Females will mate with most of the males in a group within days of each other. Gorillas run the opposite system, one dominant male, a small harem of females, and every other male locked out entirely. Gibbons look monogamous on the surface, pairing off for years at a time. 3 closely related primates, 3 completely different mating systems, 3 completely different answers to the same basic evolutionary problems. And humans don't cleanly match any of them. And there's a 4th ape worth mentioning, because it complicates the picture even further. Bonobos, genetically almost as close to humans as chimpanzees, use sex constantly and casually, not just for reproduction, but to diffuse tension, cement alliances, and smooth over conflict between individuals who aren't even fertile at the time. If chimpanzees show you competitive promiscuity and gorillas show you controlled exclusivity, bonobos show you something else entirely: sex as social glue, almost disconnected from reproduction altogether. Humans, it turns out, carry fragments of all 3 systems layered on top of each other. Here's the first piece of proof, and it's sitting in your own anatomy. Compare testis size relative to body weight across primates, and you get a strikingly reliable, almost embarrassingly honest map of mating behavior. Species where females mate with multiple males in a short window need bigger testes, more sperm, more competition, more volume produced to outcompete a rival male's sperm inside the same female. Chimpanzees have enormous testes for their body size. Gorillas, who barely have to compete for mates at all, have tiny ones. Humans land right in the middle. Not gorilla small, not chimpanzee large. Squarely in the ambiguous zone, a body that hedges its bets. That's already strange enough, but it gets stranger still. Look at real hunter-gatherer and small-scale societies still practicing traditional mating systems today, and you find something anthropologists call partible paternity, the belief, held seriously and structurally, that a single child can have more than one biological father. Among groups like the Bari and the Curipaco in South America, women were encouraged to have sex with multiple men during pregnancy, on purpose, because each man who believed himself a possible father was expected to contribute food and protection to that child. Children with multiple acknowledged fathers in some studied populations had measurably higher survival rates than children with only one. That's not chaos. That's a functioning system, engineered, even if nobody wrote the rules down, to spread parental investment across more than one man. And partible paternity isn't the only structural version of multiple partners on record. Among the Nyimba of Nepal and other Himalayan communities, fraternal polyandry was standard practice. One woman married to a group of brothers together, all of them sharing fatherhood duties, and none of them splitting the family's scarce farmland into smaller and smaller plots with every generation. The Toda people of southern India practiced something similar. These weren't fringe exceptions tucked away in a footnote. They were stable, functioning family systems that lasted for centuries, built around the same brutal math every mating system eventually runs into. How do you keep children fed and land intact when resources are tight? So maybe ancient humans really were built for multiple partners across the board. Except the genetic record says something almost the opposite. Around 7,000 years ago, geneticists studying global Y-chromosome diversity found something genuinely strange: a massive bottleneck. For a stretch of human history, the genetic diversity carried on the male line collapsed dramatically, while diversity on the female line stayed relatively steady. The best, most carefully argued explanation researchers have offered isn't that most men simply died off. It's that most men simply didn't reproduce. A small number of men were fathering a large share of children, polygyny on a massive scale, while the vast majority of women were still reproducing at roughly normal rates. Picture warlords, chiefs, and powerful lineages accumulating multiple wives and concubines, while ordinary men were locked out of reproduction almost entirely, generation after generation, until it was written directly into the genetic record itself. That's not multiple partners as equality. That's multiple partners as hierarchy. A small number of powerful men monopolizing reproduction, and everyone else living inside whatever system that left behind. This is exactly where a popular idea gets it half right and half wrong. A well-known book on this subject argued that pre-agricultural humans lived in something close to open, egalitarian, multi-partner societies, and that strict monogamy only showed up once farming, private property, and inheritance entered the picture. Anthropologists pushed back hard, and the pushback matters. The ethnographic and genetic record doesn't support one single default arrangement before agriculture any more than it supports one single default arrangement after it. Some pre-agricultural groups lean toward partible paternity and flexible pair bonds. Others, especially where resources were unevenly distributed even without farming, still lean toward polygyny and jealous guarding of partners. The honest version of the story was never, humans were free-loving until farming ruined it. It was always messier than a single villain and a single golden age. So which is it? Egalitarian partible paternity, spreading fatherhood around to protect children, or brutal polygyny, concentrating reproduction into a handful of powerful men? The uncomfortable answer is both, at different times, in different places, under different pressures, and neither one is the ancient human mating system, because there wasn't one. There's a deeper reason any of this made sense in the first place, and it has nothing to do with romance. Human infants are almost uniquely helpless, born early, developing slowly, dependent for years instead of months. A single mother, on her own, would have struggled to keep a child alive through repeated pregnancies in a harsh environment. Anthropologist Sarah Hrdy and others have argued human children evolved to expect care from more than just a biological mother and father. Grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, and yes, sometimes multiple acknowledged fathers, all sharing the load. That framework, often called cooperative breeding, means multiple partners weren't only about sex or status. In a lot of ancient contexts, they were a survival strategy for the child. Look at the wider evidence, and a pattern starts to emerge. Mating systems in humans track resources and ecology far more than they track some fixed biological instruction. In lean, mobile, foraging populations with few resources to fight over, mating tends to flatten out toward something closer to serial monogamy or flexible partible paternity, spreading risk and investment because no one family could hoard enough surplus to dominate reproduction anyway. In settled agricultural societies, once surplus food, land, and inherited wealth entered the picture, polygyny exploded. A wealthy man could support and control many wives, while poorer men were pushed toward monogamy or nothing at all. Strip away the anthropology jargon, and it's almost mechanical. Mating systems follow who controls the resources. Jealousy fits into this same picture, and it's worth taking seriously as evidence rather than dismissing it as a modern hang-up. Cross-cultural studies find some version of mate-guarding behavior in nearly every human society ever studied. Watching a partner closely, reacting strongly to signs of infidelity, punishing rivals. An emotion that universal, that consistent, that physically intense doesn't show up in a species by accident. It shows up because, somewhere in our evolutionary past, The risk of a partner reproducing with someone else was real and recurring enough that a strong emotional alarm system was worth carrying. You don't evolve a smoke detector for a fire that never happens. And even inside supposedly monogamous pairs, the biology never fully committed to exclusivity. Concealed ovulation, the fact that human females don't visibly signal exactly when they're fertile, unlike most other primates, is widely theorized to have evolved specifically to make paternity uncertain enough that men couldn't simply guard one fertile window and walk away confident. Frequent, non-reproductive sex throughout the cycle, not just during fertile windows, is itself unusual among mammals, and appears to function as a bonding mechanism as much as a reproductive one. Even sperm competition genes in men, the biological machinery for outcompeting another man's sperm inside the same partner, didn't disappear from the human genome. It's dormant hardware from a mating past that was never purely one-on-one. Here's the actual, unglamorous answer science supports. Humans evolved as an unusually flexible species, not strictly monogamous, not strictly polygamous. A species capable of forming deep, long-term pair bonds, the emotional wiring for that is real and powerful, while simultaneously carrying the anatomical and behavioral leftovers of a species that also mated outside that bond when ecology, hierarchy, or survival demanded it. Pair bonding gave children two committed caregivers, a massive survival advantage for a species with helpless, slow-developing infants. But that pair bond was never airtight, and it didn't need to be evolutionarily successful. That tension didn't stay in the Ice Age. You're still carrying it. It's the reason cultures across history have built enormous, elaborate systems, marriage laws, inheritance rules, religious codes, social shame, wedding rings worn specifically where everyone can see them, specifically to hold a bond in place that biology alone was never fully going to guarantee on its own. If humans were wired for pure, effortless monogamy, you wouldn't need thousands of years of law, ceremony, and public commitment reinforcing it. You don't build a fence around a field nothing wants to enter. You build walls around the things that actually need walls. So no, ancient humans weren't simply promiscuous, and they weren't simply monogamous either. They weren't hopeless romantics, and they weren't opportunists either. They were something harder to put on a poster, a species that could fall in love for life, build a home around one person, raise children inside that bond for decades, and still carry every piece of hardware, every hormone, every ancient instinct needed not to. We didn't inherit one mating system. We inherited the argument between two of them, wired directly into the same body, and every relationship you've ever had is still, in some quiet way, having that argument for you.